Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Jai Shri Krishna
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Advaita Gadadhar Shiv Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiv Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीन बंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपी कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदानेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरि प्रिये नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। तो श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। श्री राधे गोलोकानंद भगवान की
जय।
हरे कृष्णा
जय
Krishna
Hare Krishna.
कृष्णा जय। हरे कृष्णा सचिन।
Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्णा निशा।
Hare Krishna.
कृष्णा राइट। बैक टू श्रीमद् भागवतम। हम थोड़ा लेट शुरू करेंगे अपना। शैल वी चेंज आवर टाइमिंग्स? बिकॉज अभी अपना टाइमिंग एडजस्ट कर सकते हैं। अभी थैंक्सगिविंग वीक भी आ रहा है। सो इज 9:30 बेटर और क्या करना है? और इज इट लेट?
9:30 will be better.
बेटर क्या?
Yeah, just for me. I don't know about others, but
हाँ नहीं ठीक है, ठीक है, सबसे बात कर लेंगे। लेट्स सी इफ इट वर्क्स आउट। फिर ज्यादा ठीक है तो देख लेते हैं। चलो गुड, लेट्स रीस्टार्ट। सो कल हम लोग श्लोक 10th पढ़ रहे थे, राइट? हरे कृष्णा रवि।
हरे कृष्ण।
कृष्णा। सो कल श्लोक 10वां पढ़ रहे थे हम लोग ऑफ चैप्टर 25। Yesterday we started reading chapter 25th and 25th is about the devotional service. इसमें कपिल मुनि डिवोशनल सर्विस के बारे में, ट्रांसेंडेंटल नॉलेज के बारे में एक्सप्लेन कर रहे हैं और वो कह रहे हैं नाउ बी प्लीज्ड माय लॉर्ड टू डिस्पेल माय ग्रेट डिल्यूजन ड्यू टू माय फीलिंग ऑफ फॉल्स ईगो आई हैव बीन एंगेज्ड बाय योर माया and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations. तो ये कौन बोल रहा है? So इसमें देवहूति asking,
Devhuti is saying,
right? Yeah, right. So देवहूति, who is none other than mother of Kapil Muni. कपिल मुनि ने देवहूति और कर्द मुनि के घर में अवतार लिया है। कपिल मुनि के रूप में अवतार लिया है या लॉर्ड विष्णु भगवान ने। And so now Dehuti is saying she wants to gain the transcendental knowledge, and she is saying कि so far, you know, I was identifying myself with the body, and then what needs to be done. Yeah. So that's what we were reading yesterday. And it says here, I am this body. I think of the body as myself and of bodily possessions as mine. So Dehuti requested Lord Kapil to free her from that entanglement of false identification and false possession. So what it is saying is, thinking that you are this body is a false identification, and all those things I possess, my body possess, right? That's how we identify, is also a false possession. And so Dehuti is requesting Lord Kapil to free her from that entanglement of Maya. Yeah. So we'll start with the next sloka, 11th. Tam tvagataham sharanam sharanyam swabhritya sansaritaroha kutaram jigyasayaham prakateha purusasya namami satdharma vidam varishtam. So Dehuti continued, I have taken shelter of your lotus feet because you are the only person of whom to take shelter. You are the axe which can cut the tree of material existence. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you, who are the greatest of all transcendentalists, and I inquire from you as to the relationship between man and woman and between spirit and matter. Yeah. So Dehuti is saying, I take shelter of your lotus feet. मैं आपके चरण कमल का आश्रय लेती हूँ. She says, tam tva gataham sharanam. And why is that? Sharanyam. Sharanyam means because you are the only person of whom to take shelter. There is no one else. Yeah. And why is that? Because swabhritya sansar taroha kutharam means you are the axe, कुल्हाड़ी जो होती है, which can cut the tree of material existence. Yeah, the understanding of the material existence. Maya ke clutches, you only cut that. So, I namami, yeah, I offer my obeisances unto you. And of course, you, who is the greatest of all transcendentalists, yeah, says here, Satya Dharma Vidam Varishtam. He is the greatest of all the transcendentalists. And she's inquiring, Jigya se yaham prakate purusasya. So this prakriti nature and purush is man and woman. Both are known as purush, right? And prakriti, what is the relationship between the two? Is what Dehuti is inquiring from Kardam, from the Kapil Muni. Yeah. And then this is a very nice purport. So we'll read this, start this, Anilji.
Sankhya philosophy, as is well known, deals with Prakriti and Purush. Purush is the supreme personality of Godhead, or anyone who initiates the supreme personality of Godhead as an enjoyer, and Prakriti means nature. In this material world, material nature is being exploited by the Purushas or the living entities. The intricacies in the material world of the relationship of the Prakriti and Purush, or the enjoyed and the enjoyer, is called sansara, or material entanglement. Devahuti wanted to cut the tree of material entanglement, and she found the suitable weapon in Kapil Muni. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So the word is Sankhya, philosophy. Yeah. Sankhya Gyan is the one which deals with Prakriti and Purush. Yeah. So Purush is the supreme personality of Godhead, right? That is the real position. But what it is saying is, and then Prakriti is the nature, but in the material world, what happens is it's also being exploited by the living entities. So living entities are not really Purush, but with the conditioned soul, we think we are the Purush also, right? Because we can enjoy over the material world of the nature, right? And that is the material entanglement. That happens because of Maya and because of the material entanglement. And that's what Dehuti is wanting to get rid of. Yeah. And she's asking Kapil Muni to help her do that. Yeah. So let's continue to read this. Ajay.
The tree of material existence is explained in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita as Ashwatthha tree, whose root is upwards and whose branches are downwards. It is recommended that one has to cut the root of the material existence tree with the axe of detachment. What is the attachment? The attachment involves Prakriti and Purush. The living entities are trying to lord it over material nature. Since the conditioned soul takes material nature to be the object of his enjoyment, and he takes the position of the enjoyer, he is therefore called Purush. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah? So Prakriti and Purush is being explained, and then continue reading this, Sachin.
Devahuti questioned Kapila Muni, for she knew that only he could cut her attachment to this material world. The living entities, in the guises of men and women, are trying to enjoy the material energy. Therefore, in one sense, everyone is Purush because Purusha means enjoyer and Prakriti means enjoyed. In this material world, both the so-called man and so-called woman are imitating the real Purush. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the enjoyer in the transcendental sense, whereas all others are Prakriti. The living entities are considered Prakriti. In Bhagavad Gita, matter is analyzed as apara or inferior nature, whereas beyond this inferior nature, there is another superior nature, the living entities. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah? So they are living entities like us, and then we have everything else, which is apara, which is non-living entity, right? Padarth is what we call it. Nisha?
Living entities are also Prakriti or enjoyed, but under the spell of Maya, the living entities are falsely trying to take the position of enjoyers. That is the cause of Sansar Bandh or conditional life. Devahuti wanted to get out of conditional life and place herself in full surrender. The Lord is Sharanya, which means the only worthy personality to whom one can fully surrender, because he is full of all appearances. If anyone actually wants relief, the best course is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is also described here as Satsang Vidam Varishtam. This indicates that of all transcendental occupations, the best occupation is eternal loving service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Dharma is sometimes translated as religion, but that is not exactly the meaning. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Ravi, पढ़ पाओगे? Ravi? I think Ravi may be driving. So dharma actually means that which one cannot give up. That which is inseparable from oneself. It's like characteristics, right? The ramp of fire is inseparable from fire. Therefore, ramp is called the dharma or nature of fire. Similarly, Sat Dharma means eternal occupation. And that eternal occupation is engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The purpose of Kapil Dev's Sankhya philosophy is to propagate pure, uncontaminated devotional service, and therefore he is addressed here as the most important personality among us those who know the transcendental occupation of the living entity. Yeah. So we read all that just to understand that the eternal occupation of all the living entities is really the engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And that is being compared with like fire has a ramp. Yeah. So that cannot be separated. That is the nature of the fire. That is the religion of the fire. So the religion of the eternal entity is the engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. And that is what is being explained by Kapil Dev's Sankhya philosophy. Yeah. So let's continue reading next shlok. Anilji. Anilji.
Maitreya uvacha iti samato nirvadhyamipsitam nishamya punsam pavardhanam dhiya vinandna nadyatmavatam satam gati Katir Vavasha Ish Ismati Shovita Maitreya said, after hearing of his mother's uncontaminated desire for transcendental realization, the Lord thanked her within himself for her question, and thus his face smiling. He explained the path of the transcendentalists who are interested in self-realization. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so Kapil Muni then is explaining the path of transcendentalists. Yeah, like whoever जो भी interested है in self-realization. Yeah, Satam Gati. So yeah, it says here Dehuti has surrendered her confession of material entanglement and her desire to gain release. Her questions to Lord Kapil are very interesting for persons who are actually trying to get liberation from material entanglement and attain the perfectional stage of human life. So whatever Dehuti is asking also applies to all the people who are interested in getting liberation from material entanglement. Yeah, and that is the perfectional stage of human life. Yeah, it says if you read this, Sachin.
As spirit soul, everyone exists eternally, but the Asat has accepted the material world as his shelter, and therefore he is full of anxiety. Asat Grahan, the incompatible situation of the spirit soul who has the false idea of enjoying matter, is the cause of souls being Asat. Actually, the spirit soul is not Asat. As soon as one is conscious of this fact and takes to Krishna consciousness, he becomes Sat. Satam Gati, the path of the eternal, is very interesting to persons who are after liberation. And his lordship Kapil began to speak about that path. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So Sat means eternal, right? Always there, truth. And Asat is temporary. So as we know, the spirit soul is actually Sat, right? But because we are conditioned, what has happened? Because we accepted the material world as our shelter, so we have got the Asat nature. And because of that, we are full of anxiety and all that. And so that is an incompatible situation. That's what it's mentioning. Because we are eternal. We have a soul which is eternal, right? So that is Sat. But because of the conditional nature, because you got conditioned with the material world, it acts like Asat. And that's the incompatible situation. And because of the incompatible situation, that's why everything is full of anxiety and so on and so on. But what happens is, as soon as one is conscious of this fact, and we realize that, okay, this is not the truth, we really need to realize our Sat nature, our eternal nature of the soul, and we take to the Krishna consciousness, then becomes Sat. Yeah, Satam Gati hai. The path of eternal is very interesting to persons who are after liberation, who understands that this material world is temporary and we really need to go back to Godhead. So Lordship Kapil began to speak about that path, the transcendental path. Yeah. Ajay?
योग श्री भगवान उवाच योग आध्यात्मिक पुंसा मतो निश्रेयसाय में अत्यंतो परित. The personality of Godhead answered, the yoga system which relates to the Lord and the individual soul, which is meant for ultimate benefit of the living entity and which causes detachment from all happiness and distress in the material world, is the highest yoga system. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, highest yoga system. So Sri Bhagwanu Vach, yeah? Sri Bhagwanu Vach is Kapil Muni, yeah? Kapil Muni is incarnation of Lord Vishnu. So now Kapil Muni is answering to Devhuti and explaining the yoga system. So the first thing the personality of Godhead is saying is the highest yoga system. And the yoga system which relates to the Lord and the individual soul. Yeah, Adhyatmika Punsam. That is the individual soul and the spiritual and the Lord, right? That relationship is the highest yoga. And then what happens once you understand the relationship? Then it says here, Dukashya cha, Sukashya cha. So basically, gets detachment from all happiness and distress, both. So not just distress, but also the happiness. Yeah, Dukh and Sukh becomes equal. Yeah, it says so. One practices yoga in order to attain perfection on the spiritual platform. So nowadays, you see all this yoga and all that, which is good for physical activities as well. But the real yoga is our connection to the yoga, is the connection to the Lord, right? And that is on the spiritual platform. And so he says, Lord Kapil will eventually explain how it is transcendental. And the preliminary introduction is just given here right now. Nisha?
Mimam te pravakshami yamavotam puranage. Rishinam shrutu kamanam yogam sarvanga naipunam. O most pious mother, I shall now explain unto you the ancient yoga system, which I explained formerly to the great sages. It is serviceable and practical in every way. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So Kapil Muni just took birth, right? Like he got manifested to Dehuti. But what is he saying? He explained formerly to the great sages, right? That's because the Lord Vishnu is always there, right? He says here, Rishinam Shrotukamanam. Like even in Bhagavad Gita, if you remember, we see that Lord Krishna tells Arjun that I have already read this, explained Bhagavad Gita to Lord Son, right? So Lord Krishna has always been there. And that's what he's saying even here, that I'll explain you this, which is the ancient yoga system, which I explained formally to the great sages, right? All the big Rishi Munis has always been, has already been explained. And he's saying that it is serviceable and practical in every day. Sachin?
चेतः खल्वस्य बन्धाय मुक्तये चात्मनो मतं गुणेषु सक्तं बन्धाय रतं वा पुंसि मुक्तये. The stage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called conditional life. But when that same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. I mean, we have read this again and again, right? It says here, Guneshu Sattam Bandhaya. Guneshu is like those three modes of material nature. Yeah, Satogun, Rajogun, and Tamogun, as we know that. And that's the part of the material nature. So once we are into, attached to those gunas, that is the conditional life. And that's what we are, right? We are living the conditional life. And who is attached to that conditional life, right? It's still, that's a chit, is what it is saying. But when the same consciousness says, Ratam va punsim muktaye, means if the same consciousness, instead of attaching to the conditional matter, right, gets attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one is situated in the consciousness of the liberation. Yeah, says muktaye chat anu atmano matam. Yeah. So read this, Nisha.
There is a distinction here between Krishna consciousness and Maya consciousness. Guneshu or Maya consciousness involves attachment to the three material modes of nature under which one works, sometimes in goodness and knowledge, sometimes in passion, and sometimes in ignorance. These different qualitative activities with central attachment for material enjoyment are the cause of one's conditional life. When the same Sheta or consciousness is transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, or when one becomes Krishna conscious, he is on the path of liberation. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah? So that's what it's saying. Yeah, the chit, yeah, chit or the consciousness. Yeah, we say the soul is Sat Chit Anand, right? So the chit. So the chit is right now, and there's a chit between soul and the and the Suksham Sharir, right? It says that chit, if is attached to the three modes of material nature, yeah, then we are conditioned. But when we try to put that same chit towards the devotional service and towards Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, then we start our path on the liberation. Yeah, we start on the path of going back to Godhead is what is being mentioned here. Nisha?
Aham mama bhimanoteha kama lobha vivirmalehi vikam yada manah shuddha madhukham sukham samam. When one is completely cleansed of the impurities of lust and greed produced from the false identification of the body as I and bodily possessions as mine, one's mind becomes purified. In that pure state, he transcends the stage of so-called material happiness and distress. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, says a lot of things like aham, abhimano, yeah, kam, lobh, adhi, yeah. And when mind starts getting purified, yeah, you get completely cleansed of all those impurities and mind starts becoming purified, then in that state, he transcends the stage of the so-called material happiness and distress. So then you start getting above the Shuddham, Dukham, Sukham. And they start looking at Samam, yeah, like equal, is what is being mentioned. Let's read this, Anilji. Anilji?
You asked me to read the purport.
Hmm.
In the beginning, Lord Kapil has said that perfect yoga enables one to transcend the platform of material distress and happiness. How this can be done is explained here. One has to purify his mind and consciousness. This can be done by the Bhakti Yoga system, as explained in the Narad Pancharatra. One's mind and senses should be purified, tat partvena nirmalam. One's senses must be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. That is the process. The mind must have some engagement. One cannot make the mind vacant. Of course, there are some foolish attempts to try to make the mind vacant or void, but that is not possible. The only process that will purify the mind is to engage it in Krishna. The mind must be engaged. If we engage our mind in Krishna, naturally the consciousness becomes fully purified and there is no chance of the entrance of material desire and greed. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so this is such an important paragraph for all of us. Is that like, so Kapil Muni is saying that, you get rid of the kam, lobh, aham, ahankar, and all that, and purify your consciousness. But then how do we really get rid of it? And how do we really purify our consciousness? Right? And that is what is being mentioned here. That is the Bhakti Yoga. So in Bhakti Yoga, what happens is our chit. What happens is one's mind and senses should be purified. So how that can be done? Must be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. And that is the process. So when we are chanting, when we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and as we read previously also, right? पहले भी हमने पढ़ा कि धीरे-धीरे, slowly and slowly, we will start getting blessing of the Lord Himself, and the Lord Himself will start revealing and our consciousness will start becoming pure by itself as more and more we start engaging ourselves in devotional service. And that is the process. That is the process described in our Bhagavad Gita. In Lord Shri Krishna himself tells that. And that is the process described in Srimad Bhagavatam as well. Yeah. And the mind must be engaged. The mind is engaged in Krishna consciousness. Then everything starts, the consciousness starts becoming pure. And then we start moving towards the path of liberation or going back to Godhead. Yeah. Tada Purusha Atmanam Kevalam Prakriteha Param Nirantaram Shvam Jyotire Animanam Akhindatam. So at that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. Yeah. So then it's describing, Kapil Muni is saying the soul, once the consciousness becomes purified, our chitta, our mind gets purified, at that time, one can see himself to be transcendental to material existence. Yeah. Says that time you can see Kevalam Prakriteha Param. Yeah. And what do you see? Nirantaram Swam Jyoti. That is self-effulgent. Then you can see Swam Jyoti. You can see that you are beyond this material existence. You are self-effulgent. And then you are never fragmented. Yeah, it says Akhanditam. Akhand, right? We say never fragmented. Although very minute in size. Yeah, it says yeah, Animanam. Animanam means is like we know, like very minute size, like even less than an atom and all that, right? So that's how we start realizing and we start seeing our soul and start getting to the transcendental nature. Yeah. Again, long purport, but very nice. So let's read the purport. Ajay. Ajay.
In the state of pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness, one can see himself as a minute particle, non-different from the Supreme Lord. As is stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Jeev or the individual soul is eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Just as the sun's rays and minute particles of the brilliant constitution of the sun, so a living entity is a minute particle of the Supreme Spirit. The individual soul and the Supreme Soul are not separated as its material differentiation. The individual soul is a particle from the very beginning. One should not think that because the individual soul is a particle, it's fragmented from the whole spirit. Mayavad philosophy enunciates the whole spirit exists as sorry, I think I missed it. Mayavad philosophy enunciates that the whole spirit exists, but a part of it, which is called the Jeev, is entrapped by illusion. The philosophy, however, is unacceptable because spirit cannot be divided in like a fragment of matter. That part, the Jeev, is eternally a part as long as the Supreme Spirit exists. His part and parcel also exists. As long as the sun exists, the molecules of the sun rays also exist. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So this is how the soul has been described. Yeah. And the most important part, of course, is that the soul, which we are the soul, right? The individual soul is eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Yeah. So we are all part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but because the soul has come in touch with these three modes of material nature, it has become conditioned and we have forgotten our relationship to the Lord. And that is what is being mentioned here. And it's none different from the Supreme Lord, right? It's part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. It's not fragmented is what is being mentioned here. Yeah. And it's compared with like the sun and the sun rays. Right? So let's continue reading this. Nisha.
The Jiva particle is estimated in the Vedic literature to be 1/10,000th the size of the upper portion of a hair. It is therefore infinitesimal. The Supreme Spirit is infinite, but the living entity or the individual soul is infinitesimal, although it is not different in quality from the Supreme Spirit. Two words in this verse are to be particularly noted. One is Nirantaram, which means non-different or of the same quality. The individual soul is also expressed here as Animanam. Animanam means infinitesimal. The Supreme Spirit is all pervading, but the very small spirit is the individual soul. Akhanditam means not exactly fragmented, but constitutionally always infinitesimal. No one can separate the molecular parts of sunshine from the sun, but at the same time, the molecular part of the sunshine is not as expansive as the sun itself. Similarly, the living entity by the constitutional position is qualitatively the same as the Supreme Spirit, but he is infinitesimal. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so it's infinitesimal, but the Supreme Lord is infinite, right? Is what is being mentioned here. The important part is also the size of the soul is given. Yeah. And what is the size of the soul explained in the Vedic literature is 1/10,000, 1/10,000, right? 1/10,000 of the size of the upper portion of a hair. Yeah. So if you take a hair, whatever is the size of that, and 1/10,000 of that is the size of the soul is given. Yeah. We will not find this in any science book because they cannot even see the soul. Right? But the soul is there, as we know, and that is the size of the soul given 1/10,000, the size of the upper portion of a hair. So just remember this, pretty important. Yeah. So I think we'll pause here. And if you remember, right, we talked about we have this physical body. Yeah. And then the next layer we have Suksham Sharir, the shuttle body. And the shuttle body is composed of three things. Which are those three things? Suksham Sharir is what?
Man, Buddhi, and Ahankar, self-ego.
Right, yeah. So the shuttle body or the Suksham Sharir is Man, Buddhi, and Ahankar. Intelligence, mind, and the self-ego are the part of Suksham Sharir. Like when one lives this world, he lives with the Suksham Sharir. The soul goes along with the Suksham Sharir and that takes another body, yeah. So, and then of course we have the soul. Yeah, that's Atma. So we got this Sthul Sharir, physical body. Then we have the Suksham Sharir, which is intelligence, mind, and self-ego, Man, Buddhi, and Ahankar. And then we have soul, which is Atma, right? And that Atma is related to Paramatma, Supreme Soul. Yeah. And that's what is being mentioned. The Supreme Soul and the soul are eternal. They are always there. Yeah. It's always existing. So since when the Supreme Lord was existing, the soul has always been existing. But we have been just through all these different births and deaths and all that and got conditioned because we also wanted to be Purush, right? It was written, right? The difference between Purush and Prakriti. So because of that, yeah. Sorry. So it's only 1 minute. Have a long, nice weekend. And let's hear the Tulsi Aarti for a second, and then we'll see you on Monday. Yeah. Hare Krishna.